Russia.
More sanctions on 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 Russia.
Seize Russian assets.
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 This conversation about the seizure of assets has been going on for a long time. Unfortunately, many people say it's a step too far. How though? We all see it very clearly that Russia is ruled by criminals, by crooks. They've amassed all of that money by a crime. It's dirty money. This could be called the biggest anti-money laundering scheme in humanity. If we take that money away from the money they stole from the Russian people, from the Ukrainian people, from all the peoples they have ruled in the past, we can give it to the people who need it the most. The Ukrainian people who are fighting for freedom, who are the bulwark of democracy and of the values of the West. To allow Ukraine to fall is to take the step many steps closer, to take the West many steps closer to its demise. We need to understand that. Every life of a Ukrainian saved today is a life of a Westerner saved in the future. A life that might be lost fighting against a more powerful and more brazen Russia. Why risk Western lives in the future if they can be saved by saving Ukraine? Especially considering the fact that this promise has been made already in the past. In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine gave up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world in exchange for nothing more but the peace agreement with Russia. And what did the Ukrainian people get in return? Russia, a terrorist state, violated this agreement and has attacked Ukraine plenty of times and is now engaged in a full-scale war with Ukraine, where the only weapon they have not yet used because they're afraid of Western retaliation are their nuclear weapons. They've used every other weapon at their disposal. Laughably so, they have lost 1/3 of their fleet against a country with no fleet whatsoever. Now that is a good one. That's a good scoop, I'd say. And from the West, what do we hear from the West? Ukraine fatigue? Oh, but it costs money. Oh, but Ukraine is corrupt. Was Ukraine not corrupt when the Budapest Memorandum was signed? Would it not cost money back then to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia? So why then? Why was Ukraine encouraged? Why was Ukraine pushed into signing this agreement and giving up all of their nuclear weapons? So that in the end, we can hear excuses instead of legitimate, real help. Is that how the free world behaves when the chips are down, when negotiations finish? As the saying goes, when diplomacy ends, war begins. And diplomacy has ended with Russia very long ago. The talks we've been having with Russia, the peace treaties we've been having with Russia are nothing more but distractions by the Russian terrorist regime. And right now at this moment, we can prove it very easily, in fact. There's many occasions of this happening, but I would like to focus on one particular occasion, which is absolutely unquestionable, no matter who you ask. The second Minsk agreement would entail a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, or rather in those days, between the Donbass republics and the Ukrainian people. However, when the second Minsk agreement was signed, the Russians had an advantage in a certain battle, the Battle of Debaltseve. You guys might have heard about it before, especially the people who are savvy about this war. The Battle of Debaltseve was perhaps the worst Ukrainian defeat that Ukraine ever suffered against Russia. Why, you might ask, was that defeat suffered? Well, the battle was ongoing. When peace was signed, why did the battle not stop? Well, because the Russians betrayed their agreement the next day. They felt like they had a local advantage. And they continued to attack the Ukrainians, who were expecting them to stop. Because of course, if you sign a peace treaty with someone, if you sign a ceasefire, it means the fire ceases. Isn't that right? If you have signed a peace treaty with your enemies, it means your enemies need to stop attacking you. That's what the Ukrainians were expecting. But the Russians, they've signed this treaty and they used this expectation to surround Ukrainian troops and to claim victory in the Battle of Debaltseve. Treachery was their tool to victory. This is why, a few days after the Minsk agreement, the Battle of Debaltseve has ended. Not before, but after. Because the Russians did not care. They did not care about whatever they signed. They only cared about short-term benefit. Because they still believe that they're going to get away scot-free in this situation. They need to be shown that there will be no escape for those who have committed such heinous crimes as they have. The only way for us to do that, my friends, is together. All together, we will win!
All together, we will win!
All together, we